That was very good. That was very good for so late in the week after we've all been very busy learning things and not getting sleep and meeting with our friends and colleagues. So I'm glad to hear so much energy. Welcome to Thursday, the fourth day of the Aviation Forum. I hope that you're finding the week very fruitful and productive. I know I'm learning a lot. I was just mentioning to Michael that I've spent so many years in the space business, and it's nice to spend some time on the aviation side of the industry, and I've had thousands of questions everywhere I've gone, and I think you probably are experiencing the same thing because there's just so many interesting topics going on this week. Yesterday we heard about global supply chains and a little bit how the interface with technology in the supply chain business is going and how that affects the efficiency and the issues that we deal with there. And there were some great discussions about the UASs and the interface with the airspace and the emissions and noise and things like that. So yesterday was a really great day, and we have a lot of wonderful topics lined up today. I know the technical sessions are going really well. I've poked my head into many of them and find everybody really engaged and active and learning. So it's been really great. Also, we had a wonderful lunch yesterday in the exhibit hall, and please today visit the exhibit hall. It's going to be closing. It's open between 9 and 11:30, and you have a last chance there to go in and meet some of our exhibitors and the great products they have. As well, I'll take this opportunity once again to thank our sponsors. For Aviation 2014, we have our premier sponsor, Lockheed, as well as our supporting sponsors, Airbus, Boeing, Dunmore, the Georgia Center of Innovation for Aerospace, Gulfstream, and Honda Jet. We really appreciate their support. I've been watching the Twitter boards, and it's been really exciting to see some of the tweets that people have been doing. I haven't been doing personally as many as I should have, so I'll try to get better, but it's been fun to communicate with people over in the Twitter sphere and talk about what's going on at the conference. One more housekeeping note. With this plenty of reminder, we're being broadcast live stream, so for Q&A, we're going to have actually cards today for Q&A, and you've had a chance to pick some cards up on the way in, and so make sure you fill out your questions on the cards, and we'll have some staff running around to pick those up. And then we'll have a great session this morning as well. So what I'd like to do is to kick us off, I'd like to introduce Vicki Cox. Vicki retired last year from the FAA as Assistant Administrator for NextGen, following more than 30 years of government service. She's been an active member of AIAA for more than 15 years, and Vicki is continuing her involvement in advancing aviation through activities such as serving on our Executive Steering Committee. So we thank you, Vicki, for your time and effort in putting this forum together. Her aerospace career highlights include service to the Office of the Secretary of Defense, Air Force, and NASA, and a 4-year assignment in London as Technical Director of the European Office of Aerospace Research and Development. And it's her contributions to NextGen at the FAA that make her an ideal candidate to introduce today's keynote speaker. So Vicki, please, I welcome you to the stage.
Well, thank you, Sandy. I'm really delighted to be here, both as a member of the Executive Steering Committee and to introduce the Honorable Michael Whitaker, Deputy Administrator of the Federal Aviation Administration. When I was at the FAA, conferences like this one were really wonderful opportunities to interact with colleagues and from industry and academia. And not only that, but to stay abreast of the latest progress on projects and in research. The conversations that we have in the hallways, after sessions and before sessions, and in the breaks provide really valuable insights into the current thinking in our community. Having a finger on the pulse of aerospace is critical to government decision makers. In my opinion, of equal importance to that is for industry and academia to hear from policymakers firsthand. And this morning is just such an opportunity. Not only will you have an opportunity to hear from an important policymaker, you'll have an opportunity to ask him questions. There are cards being passed out on which you can write your questions. Be sure to hand them in, and at the end, they'll be acknowledged and addressed to our speaker to the extent that time will allow. So, Michael G. Whitaker has been the Deputy Administrator for the Federal Aviation Administration since June of 2013. As Deputy, he's responsible for helping to ensure the safe and efficient operations of the largest aerospace system in the world. This includes over 50,000 daily operations, as well as enforcing safety standards for all equipment and aerospace professionals within the aviation industry. He also fills another very important role for the FAA by serving as the Chief NextGen Officer. He has responsibility for NextGen's development and implementation. Michael Whitaker is a seasoned aviation executive with extensive business, regulatory, legal, and international experience. He's well-versed in general and commercial aviation and has led collaborative efforts and joint ventures to promote aviation safety and enhance performance and profitability. He fostered alliances and improved corporate governance. In addition, he has vast finance and marketing experience, which includes tracking key performance metrics and achieving identified goals and objectives, all of which serve him well in his role as Chief NextGen Officer. Before joining the FAA, Mike most recently served as a board member and business development consultant for the Interglobe Enterprises, following his stint as Group Chief Executive Officer for Interglobe. From 1994 to 2009, he was with United Airlines, most recently as Senior Vice President for Alliances, International, and Regulatory Affairs. Prior to that, he served at Trans World Airlines from 1991 to 1994 as Assistant General Counsel for Regulatory and International Affairs. He's a graduate of the University of Louisville and holds a JD from the Georgetown University Law Center. Ladies and gentlemen, the Honorable Michael Whitaker.
Good morning, everybody. And thanks to Vicki for that nice introduction. As she mentioned, part of my job is to be Chief NextGen Officer, and you'll meet Ed Bolton a little bit later, who is our Assistant Administrator for NextGen. And both of us really inherited this from the good work that Vicki did in setting up NextGen and establishing that office. So I just wanted to acknowledge her for that work, and it must be rewarding to put something in place that is envisioned to span a 20 years, which NextGen is as an endeavor, and then watch it come to fruition. So I just want to thank Vicki for her good work. I'm going to talk about NextGen and some of the issues that we're dealing with at FAA, but I want to start by putting it in a little bit of context. And I want to talk about what I think the next 25 years is going to look like in the industry. And I want to do that by reflecting back a little bit on the last 25 years and putting us at a certain point in time, because I think we're really at a pivotal point in the industry, and a very good point in the industry. As Vicki mentioned, I joined the airline industry in 1991, which I think by any definition was probably the worst moment in history to join the airline industry. For those of you who lived through those last couple decades, when I joined, Eastern Airlines had just gone out of business. Those of you in Atlanta will probably remember that. Pan Am was on the verge of going out of business, and we were in the throes of a massive disruption in the industry caused by deregulation, which happened in 1978. So in that context, I had the good sense and foresight to join TWA right before they went into bankruptcy for the first of 3 times. It was, I think, in the early 90s, widely recognized that we were going to go through a period of extreme turmoil. I don't think anyone expected it would take quite as long for deregulation to shake out as it did. But even in the early 90s, people thought eventually we would end up with a big 3 airlines. Southwest was not considered a major actor at that point, and I would say we probably ended up with a big 4 when you count Southwest. But no one envisioned it would take quite as long as it did. If you were an airline employee, you went through furloughs, you changed companies almost inevitably. If you were a pilot, you went through furloughs. There were bankruptcies. Many employees lost their pensions. We had a war in Iraq, you might remember from the early 90s. Then we had 9/11 and another war in Iraq. Afghanistan, SARS, oil spikes. I was reflecting back that soon after I joined United, and I guess it was the mid-90s, we had an executive retreat where we went to Lima, Peru, with some consultants who said, we're going to have a long-term vision of what the airline industry will look like from 1995 going forward. And they set up 4 or 5 scenarios, and then we spent a lot of time working on these scenarios. The one scenario we didn't really look at very much was what they had entitled the worst case scenario. And the worst case scenario included a recession, it included some bankruptcies. And the executive team that was looking at these scenarios said, this worst case scenario is so ridiculously bad that it's not really a good use of our time to dwell on it. So let's spend most of our time on these other scenarios. And I can tell you that worst case scenario was nowhere near as bad as the actual reality of what happened going forward. So I know there are a lot of students in the audience and at the conference, and this is not an effort to get you to change majors. Because I think the good news is that all of that turmoil of the last 25 years has really come to a head, and we are at a turning point. Just recently we completed what I would go out on a limb and say is probably the last of the big mergers that we'll have in the industry, because I don't think there are really too many people left to merge. And so what that means is a lot more stability. And I think if you're a pilot starting in the airline industry now, it's not unreasonable to expect you could stay at one company for your entire career, something that was almost impossible to do over the last couple decades. If your ambitions are to be an air traffic controller, the FAA is hiring 6,000 controllers over the next couple of years, largely due to some demographic dynamics that came out of President Reagan firing all the controllers in 1981, so all the new controllers are at retirement age now. So there's a lot of opportunity in the industry, and I think there are really 3 things that I'll mention that make the next 25 years look very attractive. One is that stability, that there won't be the mergers and the turmoil that we've had, at least for, I think, a couple of decades. 2 is something you've talked about, I know, a lot at this conference already, which is new users to the system. And in the space of new users, I really think of 2 categories. One is commercial space. We had a week in January this year when we had as many commercial launches as we did in all of 2012. The growth in commercial space is really phenomenal and doesn't get quite the attention of some of the other new technologies that are out there. But if you were to visit the Mojave Space Center, you would see a huge number of startup companies renting out hangar space and spending all their days shooting off rockets in the desert. And it's an incubator of technology like I've never seen before. And the creativity and the investment that's happening in that space is enormous. One of our challenges is how to incorporate what typically are vertical operations into our horizontal airspace. But that is one of our priorities and one of the things that we intend to do. The second category of new users is UAS. And I know you've had panels on UAS, and you'll have more discussion today. I think the uses of UAS we're only beginning to think about, both in the category of small UAS, which I think is the more immediate commercial need, and then the larger UAS as well. If you think about that segment, each one of those vehicles will have a pilot. Not in the traditional sense that we think of a pilot, but each one of those vehicles will be operated by a pilot, will be designed, have engineers involved, maintenance involved. It's a booming sector that I think we're just beginning to get our mind around. And the third factor, I'll come back to NextGen, because NextGen is fundamentally transforming the way we're looking at air traffic and managing air traffic. And it was designed and conceived as a 20-year-long endeavor. And it was designed with the recognition that before we can build some of these really interesting capabilities into the air traffic system and manage some of the new technologies, first thing we have to do is upgrade the old system. The old system dated from the 70s and 80s, and even before the 70s and 80s, was very, very limited technology. If you think about computers, we didn't really even have computers in our daily lives in the 70s and 80s. So this was very old technology. We had to change out the computer systems, the software, the procedures in every high altitude, all 20 of our high altitude centers, in all 160 plus TRACONs, our approach centers, the towers, and we had to do all of that work, the work that Vicki started, while the system continues to run, and we have very little margin of error, as you know, in what we do. So it was a massive undertaking, and it was a necessary undertaking, but the good news is it's one that is really in the final stages of completion. This year we completed the final installation of all the ADS-B ground stations, which is the infrastructure piece that allows us to go from a ground-based radar system to a satellite GPS-based system. The upgrades in all of the high altitude centers, all 20 centers, will be completed by next spring. Most of the centers are already up and running full-time with the new technology. And the TRACONs, as I mentioned, the approach centers, there are many, many more of those, but the major approach centers will all be upgraded to the new technology with ADS-B in 2016. So we are at the final stages, and we use the analogy with NextGen that this foundational technology was like building the iPad. And the iPad is amazing, an amazing piece of technology, but when you open it up and take it out of the box, it doesn't really do much. I mean, it's got a calculator on it, but it's a lot of technology for a calculator. It only becomes interesting when you add the apps to the iPad. And NextGen becomes very interesting when you start to add the new capabilities. And as this foundational work gets completed, we're able to start moving forward with some of the new capabilities that represent the next 2/3 of this undertaking that we're talking about with NextGen. The other focus we have with NextGen is, as this technology comes into play, ensuring that we are able to deliver benefits to users with the technology that we have. So we're very engaged with our stakeholders, not only the airlines, but also the other users of the airspace, to try to work out how to deliver benefits as quickly and efficiently as possible. We're very focused on the route network. Half of the routes in the US now have been upgraded to the new technology, and we're focused on making that as efficient as possible. Leveraging the technology that's in place for more efficient runway operations, more efficient surface operation at airports, and then moving as quickly as possible with datacom to ultimately take us out of that situation where you have the constant back and forth voice communications, which are challenging at best, and to a more text-based system. So the most recent success in this endeavor was the redesign of the airspace in Houston. And I'm going to show you a short video of just giving you a sample of that. This happened at the end of May, and at 4 in the morning, we completely switched over to a redesign of the airspace around Houston. 61 new procedures, leveraging the NextGen technology, leveraging the technology that allows you to cut the power of the aircraft and basically glide down from 38,000 feet to the threshold of the runway, saving massive amounts of fuel, reducing noise, saving time, and money for the operators. Yesterday, Secretary Fox and Administrator Huerta were in Houston to celebrate this changeover. So what you're going to see is just a brief display of what some of that technology was. And after we finish with that video, we're going to open it up for questions and hopefully have some further discussions. So if we can roll that.
Houston, Texas has a very busy airspace. Located halfway between the east and west coasts of the continental United States, the 3 airports in the Houston area experience heavy traffic. Starting early every morning, the northeast corner gateway receives the heaviest flow of aircraft. Before the Metroplex redesign, flights coming from 3 directions, out of Atlanta, Charlotte, DC, New York, and Chicago, would converge on a single entry point. Then they'd be merged into the line of traffic preparing to land at Houston's Intercontinental Airport. Often when traffic increased, the flights were slowed down and delayed, moving through one gateway. The Northwest Gateway saw the same congestion in the afternoon with traffic from the west. To help alleviate the bottleneck, the Metroplex team created 2 new entry points into the Northeast and the Northwest. These additional gateways into Houston's airspace offer twice the arrival options. Now, with additional entry points, traffic congestion is reduced. In addition to new highways and off-ramps, the procedures for landing at the airport has changed. Previously, pilots were required to approach the airport in a less efficient stair-step procedure that increased the miles flown, burned more fuel by repeated engine throttling, and increased the communication between air traffic controllers and pilots. Now, pilots follow what's called an optimized flight path that begins at a much higher descent, 38,000 feet, gliding down to the runway with engines at near idle on a much more precise and reliable path. The new procedures allow for a dramatic reduction in fuel burn and CO2 emissions, as well as a reduction in noise. In addition, it gives controllers and pilots the accuracy and predictability they need to keep the airspace running smoothly and flights arriving on time. That can save passengers travel time and save the airlines millions of dollars in fuel costs.
And just a plug for the website, you'll find other videos on that website as well and a lot more information about NextGen. So I think now, Vicki, if we want to open for questions.
It looks like we have some very good questions coming in from the audience, so I'll just start with them in no particular order. If the NAS needs to continuously evolve, will there always be a need for NextGen? What's next for the system?
Well, you know, the name NextGen kind of presents a challenge because NextGen is a little like tomorrow. It never actually gets here. But it is important to recognize that this is not a program that just you switch it on and we're done. I mean, there are certain elements in the under the title of NextGen, but it certainly will be an ongoing effort to continuously upgrade the technology. As we move into the next phase, we're looking at creating information networks to get information into the cockpit. We've seen this already with general aviation, where ADS-B-in allows general aviation aircraft really just on their iPad with a transponder to get weather information in the cockpit in graphical format, traffic information for other ADS-B equipped, and some radar broadcast. So significant safety benefits already in that space, but getting more information more quickly and then using that information and data to more efficiently handle traffic is what's next. And I think that'll be I don't want to say it's going to be a never-ending project, but we will always be in a state of upgrading the system.
So I think that that ties in well, and I think you may have answered the next question that I have here. Do you think of NextGen as an evolution in the system, or does change need to be revolutionary to be effective?
We don't really do revolutionary at FAA. And one of the things I like about this video is it I think gives you a sample of the complexity of the airspace. If you think about a place like Houston, 61 procedures. Think of them as on-ramps and off-ramps into the interstate highway system that is the high-altitude airspace. Every time we make a change, there's a huge amount of safety analysis that goes into it. And I know sometimes it seems like we're not moving very fast on changing the way we do things, but in fairness, we do maintain the safest system in the world, and it is a very, very busy system. So we don't take the changes lightly, and it is definitely an evolutionary process because we have to maintain that level of safety. If you compare projects of this size to the extent that they exist in the private sector, whether it's a company putting out a new software product is probably a good analogy. They can beta test it, they can launch it with bugs that get fixed, they can mess it up and create map programs that take you out in the middle of the ocean. We don't have we don't have the ability to do that. When we launch a technology, it has to be right. There's just too much at stake to have that kind of margin of error.
So here's one just relevant to the video we just saw. What is the next metro area to change after Houston? Does demonstrated success help to get reluctant people on board?
I think demonstrating success is a key to what we do and one of our big challenges. I think many of the stakeholders and certainly the general public don't have a good grasp of the magnitude of NextGen. Certainly don't realize that as it was conceived as a 20-year endeavor. So here we are 5 years into serious funding for NextGen, and why isn't it finished? Well, that's how it was designed. So we have to do a better job communicating and building confidence that we are executing on it so that we can continue to move forward with it. And I think projects like Houston help to demonstrate that. Next up in the waterfall is North Texas, and we have a whole series after that to take us out for the next few years.
Thank you. In this austere physical time, what program trade-offs has the FAA made in order to keep NextGen appropriately funded?
The fiscal environment that we're in is much more constrained than we anticipated. If you go back to 2009 when our budget was passed, there was a projection 5 years forward of what our capital investment budget would be, and the projection was that it would be at $3.2 billion. And as we come forward 5 years to today, it's actually at $2.2 billion, so $1 billion less than anticipated. Yet we continue to try to do everything that we've always done at FAA. So it's not really a sustainable situation. We've got to meet that balance either by reducing some of the services that we provide, certainly doing things more efficiently, although sometimes doing things more efficiently involves upfront investment. For example, consolidating facilities would be one obvious area to do that, but that takes an upfront capital investment. So I think what I can say is we're keeping NextGen on track, but we're continuing to make the case that we need to keep it funded.
Thank you. Is there any collaboration with NASA on NextGen? If so, can you elaborate?
We have, we collaborate extensively with NASA. We take advantage of their good research on a number of occasions. Some of our technologies come directly from NASA. And we have an interagency group that specifically plans and looks at shared technologies. That's with NASA, that's with DoD, with NOAA and other agencies to look for efficiencies and to share technology. So we have a very solid cooperation with NASA.
International modernization efforts include NextGen and CESAR. Are there others that will be coming out from other countries or other areas of the world?
I think most advanced countries are in the process of upgrading airspace and modernizing, but there are really two blocks that have the congestion and the scale of traffic that we do, and that's the US and Europe. So we're very focused on not necessarily being completely on the same programs with the Europeans, but making sure that all of the standards that get put forth are coordinated and that we're working together very closely to work with ICAO to make sure that we've got standardization so that we have interoperability with the aircraft and the technologies.
Do you anticipate that new entrants such as UAS and commercial space will require changes to NextGen plans, or is it flexible enough to accommodate diverse new users?
I think when NextGen was put together, it didn't really anticipate some of the new users coming in, certainly at the level of intensity that we're seeing. But I think this technology, particularly the ADS-B technology, will be key particularly as we move to the larger UAS and the sense and avoid technological issues that we're managing and designing the airspace. So I think that technology will actually work quite well with the new users.
Following up on that, when will small UAS operators be able to fly legally in the NAS?
The rule is on track to be out this year. It will be out this year, and hopefully we'll be able to get it final next year and move past this point. There are very significant safety issues that we've got to resolve, and as I mentioned, we do move with care in trying to make these changes to the NAS, but we recognize this is a very significant priority. We are issuing certificates of authorization for specific users and trying to get the broad rule out as quickly as possible.
What are the steps toward ensuring security in NextGen? Who will have access and how? Has any standard been developed?
Cybersecurity is an issue that gets constant attention both in the design and the execution of NextGen. One of the beauties, if you will, of the old system is it was so antiquated it was completely isolated from the internet. But the new system will be quite internet focused. So we work very closely with other agencies to make sure that we have the monitoring and mitigation capabilities to keep it safe as we go forward and design that resiliency into the system.
So are all the technologies that are needed for NextGen in existence, or are some still being developed?
We have, I would say the core pieces of NextGen are in existence. What we find going forward is that there are often what we call decisional support tools that can be developed to make that technology run more efficiently. Metering aircraft is a perfect example of that. The ultimate goal of NextGen is to have what we call four-dimensional metering. So we really know when an airplane pushes back from the gate, exactly when it's going to take off, what its airspeeds will be, and how it will enter the traffic pattern to land, and when it will be at the arrival gate. There's a lot of technology involved in that, and there are tools that are being developed that allow that to work more efficiently for controllers managing traffic.
So in terms of ADS-B, the benefits for in and out for small general aviation aircraft appear minimal. Any consideration of waiving the 2020 ADS-B in-out requirement for small general aviation aircraft?
No, none whatsoever. And I would disagree with the premise. I actually think that general aviation is one of the big beneficiaries of the ADS-B technology. Weather accidents are the most fatal type of accident for general aviation. Pilots getting caught, VFR pilots getting caught in IFR conditions. Having that excellent weather data in graphical format available, pushed into the cockpit, I think is one of the greatest safety advances that we've seen. We have seen this year a significant decrease in general aviation fatalities. I can't stand here and tell you why that's happened. We are certainly looking at that. But that is one of the factors that has changed in the last couple of years is that weather information in the cockpit. When you couple that with the traffic information in the cockpit, I think it's hard to argue that there aren't significant benefits from ADS-B.
Thank you. Can you please comment on the DCNS project as it relates to NextGen and your opinion regarding progress?
I'm not sure what the DCNS project is.
I was hoping that you were.
Now, someone's gone all technical on me. I don't know.
Can the person that asked this question maybe identify what DCNS is? Oh, there we are. Sir? Oh, data communications. CP, is that what you're talking about?
I don't have specific information on the status of that, so I'm not sure I can enlighten you. I don't know if we have any technical expertise in here that can do that. But
Yeah. No, I think that, but I'm sure that someone here will take a note on that and get back to
Yep.
you with a response. Perhaps you might try in the next panel that follows up with this one, which I hope you will all attend as I'm moderating. Thank you.
Little advertisement.
Okay. What is the FAA's, and this is kind of interesting. We touched on a lot of challenges. This question says, what is the FAA's greatest challenge regarding UASs?
Well, with UAS, there's obviously a lot of commercial pressure to move very quickly on UAS. The technology has moved very quickly. We operate in a system, that is designed to be very safe and have changes happen slowly because of that, but also the way the rulemaking process is, it's designed as part of our system to be somewhat slow. So keeping up with that has been a challenge. On the technology side, the sense and avoid technology still presents challenges. And really, given the number of users that I think we can reasonably anticipate in the UAS space, how we manage that traffic is going to be an ongoing challenge. But we recognize that that there is a very, very significant commercial need and economic benefit, and we are dedicating the resources to meet that.
Here's a favorite of mine. What happens to the role of air traffic controllers when NextGen is deployed?
I think, again, keeping in mind that there's not a day when NextGen gets turned on, it is an iterative process. And if you think about Datacom, for example, or if you think about the optimized profile descent that you saw demonstrated graphically in that video clip, I flew yesterday from Washington, and I flew in the cockpit of a Delta flight. And I didn't keep track, but I would guess there were between 25 and 30 communications that happened over the radio with the various TRACONs and centers between here and there. In the descent portion itself, there were probably a dozen. And in an optimized profile descent, that gets cut down to one or two, because at 38,000 or 35,000 feet, the clearance is given, and then there's no need to talk in the rest of the descent unless the aircraft is unable to meet the parameters of the descent. That's an iterative change. It allows the controllers to work on other tasks, and it changes the dynamic. As Datacom rolls out, we're going to have another set of those types of changes where the communication starts to come in text form. So it will be an iterative process. The controllers will still control the airspace, but technology will make that job different over time. These aren't things that happen immediately, and I'll say that we work very closely with the controllers and with the union in rolling out these technologies, and I think they're very much on board with making sure we have the best technology out there to manage the airspace.
Thanks. How does NextGen interact with the airspace neighbors, specifically Canada and Mexico?
We, of course, work very closely with both of the neighbors. In Mexico, we have some ADS-B installations to facilitate the management of traffic, and we're actually very engaged with all of our partners in the Caribbean and Central America as well, both on the technology side and on the safety side, largely through the workings of ICAO, to make sure that the level of safety remains the same throughout the region, and again, that we have interoperability of the technology.
Thank you. How is the collaboration going within the FAA?
I think I planted that question. I think I can say that we have excellent working relations among the groups within FAA, between the NextGen group and the Air Traffic Organization and the Safety Organization. Weekly, very intensive meetings to make sure everything is on track and everything is coordinated. And we have, I think by all accounts, an excellent working relationship with our unions and our employees in rolling out the technology. We are at a stage in NextGen where these technologies are no longer in the lab or in theory and on paper. They are actually being rolled out in the facilities. And we learned very early on in the process that you can't do that without employee engagement. So the unions are involved in all of the deployment of these technologies, and it's been a very effective working relationship.
Thank you. Do you think that the implementation of NextGen could be expedited when the FAA is split in the operator and regulator, where the operator is run privately and thereby can cut loose from congressional budget cycles?
I think that there's been a lot of debate about corporatization of the air traffic organization. It's been tried under a couple of previous administrations, both Democrat and Republican. And in both of those instances, there was a lack of consensus in the industry about whether it was a good idea, how it was funded, and what it should look like. Those issues haven't gone away. There still would need to be a consensus in the industry to move forward with something like that. But I think the real question when looking at that issue is what is the problem that you're trying to solve for? And I think for the most part, people come to the need to have stable funding for NextGen. And that's something that we haven't had in the last couple of years. We have to have, for an undertaking of this size, you have planning horizons that go out many years. You have to be able to plan your budgets. In a perfect world, you could get appropriations or borrow money further out. So to me, the issue is how do we solve the funding problem? And then within the industry itself, you have to decide who's going to pay for it. So from the FAA perspective, we are watching closely that debate. We're not taking a specific position, except to point out that really the issue is how do we get stable funding and the latitude to implement on these programs.
Thank you very much. You know, I've flipped through all the cards I have here, and I believe we've covered all of the questions that have come in from the audience, unless someone has some final ones to present. So with that, join me in thanking Deputy Administrator Whitaker for his efforts here this morning.
Thank you.
I have a small token of the AIAA's appreciation for your coming and joining us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.